Hello and welcome to Mental Health Monday. I don't think you guys can see me because I cannot see myself, which is very strange. Um, yes, put a one.
It looks like we're having some technical difficulties. Atante is we were all seeing you. I was seeing you too, Atante. There you are. Oh,
Well, there's two of Christi. Can you hear me now?
yes. Breaking up
Okay.
just a little bit, but I can hear you.
Okay, so you can hear me, and this is all right. Let me do this. Okay, we're just going to pause just for a moment so we can fix this technical issue. Why did you do something down there? Hi, welcome back. Hi, everyone. You can see, sorry about the technical difficulties. Yay, we're here together.
Yay.
Oh, that was like stressful. That was stressful. Welcome. To Mental Health Mondays. I'm like, what is the name of the program? Okay, my mind is that's what happens with the anxiety. It's like, wait, let me tap into my prefrontal cortex so I know what I'm saying here. Okay, so welcome everyone. We are so happy that you are here. As you see, it is me, Atante Myers, marriage and family therapist, but we have a special guest. And this is Christina Sanford, and I am so happy that she is with us today. She is a licensed clinical social worker, but she's also my friend. We go way back to college days.
Yeah.
Used to work together at the same radio station here in Huntsville, Alabama. So we go way, way, way back. And
way.
I don't know. It's pretty way. It doesn't seem like it. It just seems like yesterday when I see anybody from my college years or even high school years. I'm like, oh, it seems like it was just yesterday, but it wasn't quite just yesterday. I mean, we have children in college now.
Yes, we do.
And so I'm just so happy that you are here. I want to welcome again all of our viewing audience. Please put in the chat where you're watching from. We'd love to see where you're watching from. And Dr. Ricardo White is not with us today. So he will be back with us next week. And so we are excited. We will be excited to have him back. But he's not here, but Christina graciously accepted the invitation to be able to come on. All right, just want to welcome Michelle from Oregon. Welcome to Mental Health Mondays. It's great to have you on San Antonio, Texas,
Yes.
Pennsylvania. Melissa from Pennsylvania. So, yes, what you're going to want to do now is share this link on whatever social media platform you are watching from. Let them know that we're talking about recovering from trauma. And you're going to want to share this on your social media and share the link personally with any friends that you may know or family that you feel like could really benefit from this program. And so we don't want to take up too much time, even though it seemed like that when we were running around trying to figure out what's going on, it seemed like it took an hour, but it really only took about 6 or 7 minutes. So we just started a little bit late, but I want to formally introduce you so people can know exactly who you are and what you do. And I have that bio right here. Okay. But I have to put on, I tell my student clients, I said, I got to put on my older lady glasses so that I can see.
Yes,
What?
I have those.
Yes. So, yes, Christina is the founder and CEO of Stanford Global, a women's leadership development firm headquartered near Phoenix, Arizona. As an acclaimed keynote speaker, trainer, and independently licensed psychotherapist, Christina leverages over 2 decades of experience in behavioral science and nonprofit leadership to deliver highly energized, interactive keynotes, masterclass, and lecture series, and training programs on trauma informed care, transformational leadership, organizational health, personal development, mental health and wellness, and spirituality. And we are just so blessed and thankful that Christina is with us this evening. I know that the viewing audience is going to be blessed by what you share today. So as I'm
Yeah.
reading that bio, it kept going and going and going. It's like Christina knows about everything.
I
But
tried to make it short. I'm glad you abbreviated it even more.
well, yeah, I mean, I do, but it's great to have, that all of that in your toolbox. I know it benefits the clients that you work
Yeah.
with, and also when you go and speak at seminars, I know that it's a blessing as well. And so we want to jump right into this topic because when you hear the word trauma, some people think of like the worst trauma that could ever happen, right?
Yes.
And they don't, not until I really became a therapist, to be honest, did I realize that many things that happen to us throughout our life or even childhood can become a trauma in our life and affect us in our adult lives. And
Yes.
so, in your work and studies, what have you learned about what it's like to recover from trauma, how you help your clients to be able to do that? And before you answer, I want to let you guys know, of course we're taking your questions as well. So please put
Send
that
the
in the chat.
question.
Yes.
Yes, I love questions. In terms of helping my patients recover from trauma, I think one of the first things that I notice is there's a lot of shame around the trauma that people experience every day.
Mm-hmm.
So many people don't know that they're not alone. They believe that they're alone because trauma happens sometimes in the back room. It happens in the dark. It happens in moments when we're the most vulnerable.
Right.
And so what I see in so many of the patients that I serve is that before we can begin to work through the trauma that somebody experienced and identifying the emotions that are associated with it, figuring out what's happening in your body, what happened in your body when the
Mm-hmm.
trauma presented itself, we first have to deal with some of the shame on the front end around being a survivor of trauma. Anyone who is still alive after their trauma is a survivor and not a
Right.
victim.
That's right.
And so many people don't, it's a struggle for them to come to a place where they accept themselves as survivors and accept themselves as resilient human beings who have
Mm-hmm.
gone through something that is very distressing for which they didn't have the tools or the coping skills to deal with. And that's all that trauma is,
Mm-hmm.
Atante, is that, and you already know this, but for
Mm-hmm.
the audience, all trauma is a very distressing experience for which the human being does not have the coping skills to deal with. And
Mm-hmm.
so when we look at it from that perspective, we're not thinking of trauma as, oh my goodness, you were a refugee that was starved for 12 months straight, and then those things happen, and those are also traumas.
Right.
However, um, we have to come to a place where we accept that trauma is on a continuum.
Mm-hmm.
And just like any other phenomenon that happens in our psyches, trauma begins somewhere and it also expands and crescendos based on how many people are involved, whether it's an interpersonal trauma, whether it's a random trauma that is not
Mm-hmm.
interpersonal, meaning
Mm-hmm.
uh, you're driving down the street and a car crashes into you. You don't know the
Right.
person in that car. They made a mistake and hit you.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an interpersonal trauma. And so most of the trauma or the patients that I work with who have experienced trauma have experienced interpersonal trauma. That is the most impactful, the thing that really becomes pervasive throughout a person's life is when they experience trauma that involves another person, especially another person that they cared about, they loved, they trusted.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the traumas that are, I think, the most complex to heal and recover from.
Right. And so when you're saying interpersonal trauma, and you're not, it doesn't have to be what some of us think, like sexually molested or
Yes,
those type of things. It could be something which we would consider smaller, but it could have a huge impact on your
that's
life.
right. That's right. Living in the home with um, an alcoholic,
Mm-hmm.
living in the home with parents who have ongoing marital conflict, living in
Mm-hmm.
the home with a mentally ill parent,
Mm-hmm.
living in the home with a chronically or medically ill parent.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on how the parents cope with their illnesses, whether physical or psychological, it can become traumatic for the child.
Right.
And so it shows up in so many different ways. But it can be recovered from. You can heal from trauma. You can recover from trauma. There is hope when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to what you've experienced and the difficulty that you've had trying to move through it.
Right. Right. I was reading a book, and I can't think of the author's name right now, but she was talking about that we think when someone comes into therapy to deal with trauma, and to talk about it, we like to start just what's going on, like in their mind, and how, and just kind of talking them through those kind of things. But she said, really, it's beneficial to teach somebody who has experienced trauma or going through trauma how to calm their central nervous system,
Mm-hmm.
because that fight or flight freeze, she called it as well, happened there. And so
Yes.
it's still, the trauma is living there in your central nervous system. And so
Mm-hmm.
you teach your clients or patients that as well?
I do. Anybody that I talk to, whether it's a seminar, a workshop, a master class, I talk about the effect that trauma has on the central nervous system and
Mm-hmm.
how trauma can hijack your limbic system. When we're
Right.
looking at our emotional center, which is the
Mm-hmm.
amygdala in the
Mm-hmm.
brain,
Mm-hmm.
we're looking at the hippocampus, which is connected. Neurons go back and forth between the amygdala and the hippocampus
Right.
to help us to remember both pleasure and pain,
Mm-hmm.
so that we know how to respond to it. That's why those two things are connected. Our emotional center and our memory center, they are connected. And when we've experienced trauma, especially multiple traumas,
Mm-hmm.
not just one, oh, I had a car accident, oh, I fell off a bike, when we're talking about trauma that has happened over time, our limbic system gets hijacked, where we
Right.
are no longer able to manage or regulate our emotions. This is why we see people struggling with anger, struggling with responses that don't match what happened.
Right.
Someone comes up to you and says, "Oh, you look so nice." What, I didn't look nice yesterday?
Right. Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, I
I
wasn't saying that.
right. Right.
And so a lot of that is the result of unaddressed trauma, unaddressed pain. But you made a really important point. You were referencing something another psychotherapist said in
Mhm.
getting the patient to get back in tune with what's happening in their body. Trauma registers first in the body.
Yes.
It does not register in the mind. It does not register in the thoughts. It registers in the body first. And so our physiology absorbs, it takes in trauma first. And that's why it's important that when we're talking to patients, especially initially,
Yes.
is that we find out where they are physiologically. What's been happening in your body since
Mhm.
the trauma happened? How are you responding to the world outside of you? Are you what we call in psychotherapy hypervigilant? If the
Right.
door slams in a room that you're not in your house, are you jumping thinking someone is coming to hurt you? Are you experiencing just dysregulated emotions, meaning you're not able to manage emotions that come up for you in a way that serves your well-being?
Mhm.
You struggle to cope. You may be at work and not being able to deal with simple things like having a meeting, or someone might not agree with your idea at work, and you go into your office and you cry and you feel rejected, and you're experiencing all of these very powerful emotions because they're living there, they're still there. And so when certain things happen, they're activated. Those feelings, those experiences, that physiological response is activated. Um, in many circles, they call it you've been triggered. I
Right.
don't like the word triggered because the word
Mhm.
triggered is a triggering word for people. It
Mhm.
gives the imagery of certain things for certain groups of people or people who've experienced certain things. And so I like to use the word emotionally activated,
Mhm.
because that's actually what's happening, is
Mhm.
that that trauma in your body is being activated by what's happening with you relationally.
Yeah, I want to ask this question. This is coming from Michelle. She says her therapist says that the first step in trauma recovery is to make sure you are no longer in a traumatic situation or relationship is that's causing it. Is that correct? She's asking.
That is ideal,
Hmm.
Michelle. If you're in a domestic violence situation or something like that, then yes, I would tell my patient, let's talk about an escape plan first,
Right.
and then we can deal with the trauma after we've done the work of escaping and establishing yourself apart from your abuser. There are situations, however, in which a person is getting help and they still need to process some of their trauma
Hmm.
inside the context of a currently uncomfortable situation, maybe with a volatile person. It could be at work, it could be in their church, it could be in any environment. It's ideal that you move away from the trauma in order to begin working on it, but it doesn't mean that a person can't begin to deal with what they've experienced while they're in it. That's why
Hmm.
people come to therapy. People leave abusive situations while they come in while they're in the relationship.
Right.
And so sometimes it takes a while to work with the person to develop the courage and the coping skills to be able to get out.
Yeah. What is the first thing that you work on with a patient that is dealing with trauma? Like,
The
what's the
first thing I
first?
deal with is their
Yes.
physiological response.
Okay.
What's happening in your body?
Mhm.
That's the first thing I deal with. What
Okay.
is happening in your body? Let's talk about what has gone on. Let's talk about what the trauma actually is. And then once we can identify that and figure out, okay, this is what's happening in your body, let's talk about some strategies and skills to be able to reset your nervous system so
Mhm.
that we can then eventually begin to process the trauma. But one thing that's important to know is that we can't jump to psychoeducation or teaching a person all about trauma
Right.
while they're still, you know, actively and
When it's
physiologically activated.
when it's all, yeah, activated or just flared up or
Yes,
yes.
yes.
I when I speak to clients, I talk about this exact thing and just how I tell them, breathing through it, and they kind of look at you, you mean like taking a deep breath 3 times, holding it
Mm-hmm,
for 4 counts,
mm-hmm,
that's really gonna do something? No, that really calms your central nervous system down.
mm-hmm.
So there's and even, our vagus nerve, there's it's the largest nerve that runs through our body, like, so
Yes.
there's an essential oil that I personally use if I have some anxiety, and you can put it
Mm-hmm.
behind your ear, and it activates that nerve. That helps to calm your central nervous system down. These are some things that I talk about with
Yes.
clients just to get them. regulated. So you can begin to
Absolutely.
go into that psychotherapy piece.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's another question, but I got to put on the older lady glasses to see. It says, I have a 10-year-old whose grandma has issues with her dog passing, and now the 10-year-old has the same issues. It's like the grandma transferred it to the child. So, um, vicariously, the child is experiencing the trauma that does happen in a
Yes,
context.
it does.
Yeah, so that can happen, and it looks like that happened.
Oh, the dog passed before the 10-year-old was even born.
Oh,
Wow.
maybe I didn't.
No,
Oh,
you read it right.
okay, but then they just put
Mm-hmm.
that, see, took the
Yeah.
older lady. Oh, wow. That is, yeah, that is that is interesting. But we can pass, um, or I like to say we can. I when clients come in with a lot of anxiety, and I ask them about, um, their home life growing up. Was there a culture of anxiety in the home? I like to say,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, just like an anxious mother can
Yes.
pass anxiety on to her children and vice versa,
Yes.
or not vice versa, but the father as well.
Mm-hmm.
And because they're witnessing this growing up, the just that vibe or of anxiety and always worrying or always,
Yes.
being on alert.
Absolutely. And that's also present, or that gets transferred also in vitro.
Mm,
That that pre-birth, pre-delivery, pre after conception but before birth, that period of time,
right.
it those emotions and those anxieties are passed on from the mother to the child. And then once the child is born, whatever the mother is conveying emotionally and spiritually, the child will pick up as their way of coping.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's a question here. I think this happened today. I really haven't seen the news today. And this person's asking, there was another shooting in the Midwest. It says, do you
Mm.
have suggestions for people, children, staff, and family that are enduring this tragedy?
Well, it sounds like it's obviously a critical incident that has occurred,
Mm-hmm.
and the children, the parents, the teachers, the community is in a state of trauma. They're experiencing trauma now. So, in terms of suggestions for the people who are enduring this tragedy, the number one thing is to begin talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Begin talking about it. Um, Many times when something like this happens, we tend to talk a lot about the circumstances of the trauma or the circumstances of what happened. Oh, he came in, he did this, he did
Right.
that. But the important thing is to talk about your feelings about what is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm feeling very fearful. I don't want to leave the house after this. I'm not sure I want to send my children to school for weeks, for
Right.
months, and maybe never again. I'm thinking about homeschooling. I'm feeling really fearful and anxious.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about those things and being honest about your feelings. And also for parents whose children survived the shooting, to talk to them about safety and about what they're feeling, and to let them know that you're there to talk to, you're a safe space for them, and giving them space to share and process what they're experiencing without shutting it down with, you're going to be okay. I have you. You're in the house now. Nothing's going to hurt you now. Come on, let's watch some TV. I'll make you
Right.
dinner. Everything will be fine.
Yeah.
It's
Suppressing it and not acknowledging it.
mhm,
Yes.
absolutely.
Mhm.
That's what we want to avoid doing.
Right.
And it requires a lot of courage on the part of adults to be able to allow their child to um, really emote, really share what they're feeling, and to be able to hold space for them in a way that honors their well-being and supports their recovery.
Mhm. Because we're talking about, children and the school shooting that, happened today. It just made me think like when the term, because when I was growing up, I never heard the term, and I don't know, you can tell me if you did, but we're the same age, so I don't know if you
Mhm,
did.
I know.
I never heard the term bullying. Like, of course, we were teased.
Hmm.
People weren't nice all the time. There was always somebody that wasn't, kind on the playground or even in
Yeah.
school or whatever. And so when I first heard the term bullying, I was like, what's that? Even though I had experienced it as a child in
Yes.
school. But, what do you say to parents just being aware of bullying can become a trauma for a child? That can
Hmm.
impact them. Let me say this. I can't tell you how many clients I've worked with that once we're like going through their story, it leads me back to school.
Yeah.
A lot of times in junior high, I tell you, those junior high years
Hmm.
really cause a lot of issues for us
Yes, they
as we
do.
as we become adults. But I just can tell you how many times that story, or to find like the source of where that pain or that cognitive distortion started,
Hmm.
it was right there in grade school, on the playground, or, those type of things. So what do you say to
Absolutely.
parents just being aware of that to help their
Yeah.
children, just to be aware, not making everything a big deal, but being aware that, this can happen. It
Yeah.
does happen.
It does happen. It happens every day. First and foremost, the greatest indicator, the biggest indicator of a person being able to recover from trauma, especially a child, is the response they get from the people in their lives who are called to protect them.
Right.
That's the number one indicator of recovery for children, so that over time, if they experience trauma, bullying, as you're saying, Atante,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, it's important. The most important thing is how the people who are called to protect them respond to their disclosure.
Mm.
So that means when your child comes to you and says, I don't really want to go today. Why? Why don't you want to go to school? Because when I'm walking to the bus every day, you've already gone to work and I walk, and that kid down the street, he pulled out a belt on me and started like trying to
Mm.
whack me with it. And he does it every day and I have to run from him every day. When you say to the child, that should never be happening to you.
Right.
And what we're going to do is we're going to address it with the school and also with the child's parent.
Mhm.
We're going to do that now. Uh, if this is the night before school, we're going to do it before you have to walk to the bus again.
Mhm.
If I have to take off work to do it, we will do it.
Mhm.
These are the things that a child needs to hear in order to be in a space of safety, to feel validated about their experience, and also to know that their parent is there to help to protect them.
Right.
Not that the parent is walking with you to school every day and saying, get off my child, stop,
Mhm.
not that, because we do have to teach our children ways to cope. But letting them know that you're going to do everything within your power with the adults involved to ensure that the bullying stops.
Mhm.
We're not telling the child necessarily, well, you need to bring a belt yourself. And when he does this to you, then pull out your belt and whack him with it.
Right.
Okay, that's not the first course of action nor the best.
Right. Right.
So you want to start by owning and assuming authority over the situation and over the protection of your child by letting your child know that you are going to do everything you can to address the situation, and then going to do it expediently. Not a week
Mhm.
later after the belt has come out 12 times in the past 2 weeks, but immediately, because it took them a lot of courage to share it with you.
Mhm. Mhm.
Children, there's shame there for them too. Like, he's like coming after me and I don't know what to do. It makes them feel helpless and powerless over their experience. And what we want to do as parents is to reassure them and let them know, you should never be treated like this, honey.
Yes, and so the child being feeling that they've been heard, and that you responded in a way instead of just like you said, like don't be afraid, do that back to him or
Yes,
whatever. Like that's not really dealing with their fear. I mean, they're coming to you because they're not feeling safe and they have
exactly.
fear, and so you have
Hmm.
to you have to really pay attention. Like I like what you said. Like he said he didn't say, "Oh, I'm afraid to go to school because of this person doing this." He said, "I don't want to go." And
Yeah.
then, the parent digs a little deeper to find out why.
Hmm.
Just to
Absolutely.
just so that they can, share what they're going through,
Yes.
and they feel like they're heard. Another issue that some people go through is domestic violence. Um, I remember, um, it, I know someone who went through domestic violence, and they were so hyper vigilant of every single thing. I mean, the trauma made them just not to always feel
Mm.
afraid and not trust anyone, and so they were kind of in that fight or flight, but just kind of frozen state. Like
Mhm.
it was just always activated. Um, where do you begin with someone that's going through? How does that person begin their recovery from trauma?
Hmm. When we're talking about domestic violence or intimate partner violence, that is considered complex trauma.
Mhm.
Because the reason why it's considered complex is because it is increasing in intensity and it leads to death.
Right.
So we want to be very careful when we're, even as therapists, as people in the community, if you know anyone who has reported to you that they're experiencing intimate partner violence, that you get them help immediately.
Right.
Send them to a therapist, a domestic violence hotline, those types of things, so that they can get the help they need as soon as possible. A lot of times victims will minimize what's going on, so you don't know what stage they're in. They could be very close to their lives ending as a result of the violence. And so we
Mhm.
want to always be careful and always provide support to them when they report it. When we're talking about recovering from intimate partner violence and that hypervigilance that you're talking about, Tony, Atante,
It's
it,
okay.
I can say Tony.
You can say Tony.
Uh,
For those, my nickname throughout high school and college, even before high school, was Tony. So if Christina calls me Tony, it's because
yeah.
that's how she knew me. But okay.
Okay, so when we're looking at that hypervigilance, those are all the hypervigilance, the general sense of anxiety, that undercurrent of nervousness, anxiety, fear that something bad is going to happen. Those are all symptoms of anxiety. The
Mhm.
irritability, uh, not wanting to go into crowds, all of those things. When those show up for a person, in order to begin to process that, we have to go back to the original trauma.
Right.
And we have to go back in a way that still protects the survivor from being re traumatized. We used to say in therapy that, well, you have to go back to it. So let's just walk all the way through it and talk about all the details of what happened to you. And
Mhm.
that's not true. You don't have to go back to it in that way.
Right. Because that
One,
can re-traumatize them. Yeah.
absolutely. And so there are different types of modalities that help, psychotherapy techniques and modalities that help a person to recover from that type of trauma. One of them is EMDR, which is what I use with my patients. It's eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing.
Mhm. Yes.
It's a big term that means you go back to the trauma and you reprocess it in a way that empowers the person who experienced it. So if you experienced trauma, interpersonal violence,
Mhm.
and your belief about yourself was, I'm weak and I deserve to be beaten.
Mm.
I provoked him and I created this dynamic. If your belief is that, what EMDR does is help you to go back to that, to admit that that's how you feel about yourself, that's what you believe about yourself, and then to create, through processing the trauma again, a completely different perspective of who you are in the context of that trauma. So you get to choose, what do you want to believe about yourself when it comes to this relationship that is now over, but that traumatized you dramatically? You get to go back and decide, what will I now believe about myself as it relates to this person who abused me? That's one way that I help people to recover from interpersonal violence, domestic violence, any type of complex trauma.
Yeah, let's tell our viewers a little bit more about that process, because
Yes.
I'm not EMDR trained.
Okay.
I'm very, very familiar with it, but
Yeah.
how long does that process, how long does that take, like in therapy, to when you're taking them through that process and they have a complex trauma?
Yeah. I have been able to resolve a lot of what they call targets in EMDR
Hmm.
um, within 4 to 6 weeks. It doesn't have to be, oh, I'm in EMDR for 12 years because I experienced the, it's not like talk therapy. It
Right. No, it's
is,
not. No, it's not. Yeah.
it's not, it is the brain. It is a process that is bilaterally, meaning on both sides, it's stimulating the brain so that you can process your trauma out.
Hmm.
It is processed out of you, and you leave those sessions literally feeling untethered from your abuser, literally feeling untethered.
Hmm.
And so that is the effect of EMDR. It is your brain reprocessing what happened to you, experiences that you need to reconfigure in your own mind so that they no longer create a barrier to your relationships and your functioning. And it
So
can be done in very short periods of time.
so you can retrain the brain to it's not like you're burying it, like the trauma definitely
No,
happened,
yes,
but you're going to process it in a different way.
you're going to process it in a different way.
Mhm.
Just self disclosure, for me, I've experienced EMDR on the patient side
Okay.
as a patient
Okay.
doing EMDR. And my targets were removed within probably 3 or 4 sessions.
Mm.
And when I tell you that what happens in those sessions, for those of you who are God fearing or know, the Holy Spirit comes into those sessions and
Mhm.
you can feel your trauma being released and you becoming untethered.
Beautiful.
And it is very powerful. And I also provide EMDR therapy to my
Mhm.
patients, and I see it happen every day. Very powerful, powerful release, a powerful healing that happens
Mhm.
in very short periods of time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's so encouraging, when, to for those who have dealt with trauma and it to know that there's hope, that you don't always have to feel this way, that you don't
That's
always
right.
have to deal with life in this way. There's a question, and I think it kind of goes back to when we were talking about our kids and how they are dealing with things, but the question is, and you can probably see it there too, but what
Mm.
happens when your child confides in you, but refuses, or I'm sorry, confides in you and refuses for you to do something about it and tells you if you bring it up, they will never tell you anything again. So this parent basically is saying, I'm listening to my child. I want to do something about it, but they forbid me, which these teenagers and kids do these
They
days.
do. Yes.
Yes, I've had that done to me by my children.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're like,
I
"No."
think it's important just to express to the child that you are there to protect and to love them, and
Mhm.
that whether or not you're the one leading the charge to eradicate the issue from their lives,
Right.
that you all need to come up with a strategy and a plan for how you're going to handle it. It can't just be left alone. Invite the child into the process and say, what is it, because something has to be done. Let's come together and create a plan for how we're going to address this together, so that it's not you necessarily being mama bear or papa bear
Right.
going charging to the principal's office and saying, you did this to me,
Right. Right.
bring the child into that process to empower the child, give them an opportunity to help you as you guide them to create a viable plan for addressing the issue. Offer suggestions. Um, what do you think about me maybe talking to his mom? What do you think about that? What do you think about, getting his or her input, your child's input, but insisting
Mm-hmm.
that there be a plan and empowering the child to help you to create that plan.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That will definitely allow them to feel heard, and that you are doing something about it, at the same time honoring their request,
Hmm.
not to directly at that time, because their feelings could change, but
Yes.
at that time you not say something directly, but that a plan can be formed that will still be able to deal with the situation. There's another question. It says, how do you approach the topic? I'm assuming trauma, that's what we're talking about, when you see signs. Like, I'm assuming, Jamie, that's who put that question in there, that Jamie is asking, you see signs that there's been trauma, but you don't know how to approach someone. Is that a safe thing to do? Approach someone when you think they are exhibiting characteristics or behaviors because of a trauma that they've experienced? And Jamie, let me know if that is the direction you were going with your question, but that's how I kind of took it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's very important that we not be afraid to ask questions.
mm-hmm.
Some people are dying for someone to ask them the question, do
Mm,
you feel safe?
yeah.
Are you safe in that relationship?
Mm-hmm.
Um, do you feel protected in that relationship? How is the relationship going?
Mm-hmm.
Some questions can be pointed, especially if you're concerned that the person is being traumatized in the relationship or in a situation.
Right.
Um, but keeping the lines of communication open is the number one thing you can do if you're witnessing someone who you're suspecting, like, something's not right with that person. They're going through something and they won't say anything. Ask them questions. Do you feel safe?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And wait to see what they will say, because their body language will usually tell you whether or not they feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can move forward from there. Okay, you're saying you do, but did you notice, like, you looked down and you seemed like you were, like, your voice was quivering?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't sound like you feel safe. I mean, you said it, but that's not what I'm seeing. So you can ask the question. Don't ever be afraid to ask the question, because the worst thing that could happen is the person is like, don't ask me. Of course I'm safe. Leave me alone. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to die because they said that.
That's right.
And so
But
we have
they
to
they
learn.
could they could if you
And
don't
they
say
could. Yes.
anything. Yeah.
So we've got to be willing to face a fear of rejection or a fear of them saying, oh, why are you asking me that? Me and my boyfriend are fine, or my husband, stay out of our business. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's fine. You're going to be okay. But as Tony said, they may not. And so always take the risk of asking
Mm-hmm.
the question.
Yes, I had somebody very close to me was in a domestic violence situation, and I didn't catch the signs right
Hmm.
away. I didn't catch the signs right away, and when they finally came to me, I mean, then I thought back in retrospect, like, oh wow, I could clearly see the signs now. The different
Yes,
behaviors and those type of things. But definitely, if you do see signs, I agree with Christina. Don't be afraid, because um, they could lose their life, if
absolutely.
just because someone didn't want to speak up. We have another question, or it might be a comment. Let's see. Oh, okay.
Oh,
Yeah. I'd rather be beaten than experience the emotional abuse I have. I am so
hmm,
sorry, Michelle, that you are going through that. Um, again, I heard this story of this young lady who her father was in prison for sexually assaulting her. Her
Mhm.
stepfather molested her, but she said the worst of everything was her mother's emotional abuse. She said her mother's emotional abuse towards her was worse than those
Mhm.
physical assaults. And so emotional abuse can cause um, lots of trauma. And, Michelle, just to we're not your mental health professionals, but um, where you live, there's resources there. But even if you can't, get into um, if you don't have insurance to get mental health, or there's county services that
Yeah.
can that are very good mental health services. And so if you email me or email us at Living Manna Church and CC for Mental Health Mondays,
Yeah.
we can help you get in contact with somebody, a mental health professional in your area that can help. So
Yes. And
go ahead, Christina.
and for those of you who, because we don't know, I know we don't know Michelle's situation.
No, I
Oh,
don't.
good. You're in trauma treatment the
Oh,
last few
good.
years. Excellent.
That is
I
good.
was getting the sense that you were speaking about past experience with trauma, but if you are in a situation right now, whether it's past trauma or current trauma, and you want to begin care with a therapist, psychologytoday.com is sort of the hub for all of us therapists who are
It is.
seeing patients and working with people. Psychologytoday.com. For those of you who are of the BIPOC population, Black, Indigenous, people of color,
Mm-hmm.
Therapy for Black Girls is also a place you can go to receive therapy, to find therapists in your area that speak specifically to the needs of the BIPOC population. Therapy Den is also another place you can go to find a therapist in your area by zip code or by address. It's Therapy Den, as in family room,
Right.
DEN, or Alliance
Right.
Den.com. Those are three places or three resources that you can use to find a therapist in your area who specifically takes your specific insurance,
Right.
and who specifically treats the issues that you're dealing with. You can even type in your issue, like, oh, depression, anxiety, parenting, whatever it is,
That.
and a list of clinicians will come up in your area, whether they take insurance, which insurances they take, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
there's help out there for
There is.
us.
Yes, there
Hmm.
is. There's another question from Jamie, who is, as she said, is a female. She said, "What if the
Hmm.
victim is a male?" And that is
It's very
very
common.
possible, and it does happen, and it's common.
Hmm.
Um, Men get physically abused,
Yeah.
and definitely emotionally abused, but
Mhm.
a lot of times don't want to talk about it.
Right. Yes. If the victim is a male, one of the best things you can do is provide him with support around letting go of his shame, especially if it's physical abuse. Letting him know that, there's help out there for this, and you don't have to deal with this. You
Mm-hmm.
don't have to be abused by your partner. You don't have to continue to be in a relationship where you are constantly being beat up on or hurt at all. It goes both ways, both for women and for men. That if you're in a relationship like that and the person is perpetually doing these things to you,
Mm-hmm.
and you all haven't gotten any help, or the person has not gotten any help for, I'm speaking more of emotional abuse, the emotional abuse piece. If it's physical abuse, although emotional abuse is much more crippling, but if it's physical abuse, you need to get out as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't work with patients who are actively in domestic violence situations as a couple because sometimes people want to come in like, he's beating me and I just want us to come in and, I mean, just talk about,
Doesn't work like
no,
it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
no.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. It's just going back to, um, I had a client who was abused by his girlfriend who had borderline personality
Hmm.
disorder, and so he never knew. So she was emotionally abusive, obviously, because they just would get angry. It's like angry so quickly. It's like walking on
Yes.
eggshells, but physically abusive
Hmm.
as well, and it was a difficult process for him to realize that that's what was happening to him because, in our society, you think like, okay, women get abused and they definitely do, but men get abused
Exactly.
too. And it's just
Yes.
as emotionally traumatizing. And they're a lot of times too embarrassed to actually say it or admit that. I think Jamie said he denies his girlfriend is abusive, but
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
happens.
That's very common, very common. And you're right, Michelle. We don't do therapy with an
With
abuser.
yeah.
What I normally do when I get calls like that, I do provide my patients with um, resources to the local or wherever they are, batterer's intervention group, so that the male or the female who is the batterer can begin to get help and to seek accountability for their actions and to experience rehabilitation and recovery from their own pain. So,
Mhm.
but the accountability comes first when it comes to batterers. It's not, let me help you heal. Okay, that's going to happen. It's hopefully if you go that far, but we need to first deal with managing and acknowledging and owning up to taking ownership for your actions. So, yeah.
Yes. Yes. Well, we don't have any new questions on there. We're just going to be on here a few more minutes. We usually end at 8, but because we started a little late, I was trying to give
Yeah,
them
we did.
some extra time. But I've thoroughly enjoyed this topic. It's
Yeah.
something that it needs to be talked about more than once, to be honest.
Yes, it
Yeah,
there's so
it's
many pieces to cover because
yes,
there's so many people going through multiple things. People
right.
are experiencing just a breakdown in their mental health because of what's going on in the world.
Yes.
We're all still recovering from the throes of a pandemic that
Yep.
lasted 2.5 years. And
Yes.
in fact, it's still, I think we're out of the pandemic phase now, and it's now just an epidemic. I think the
Or
Fauci
endemic.
said, or
Yeah. Or
yeah,
yeah.
it's an
Yes.
endemic.
An
It
endemic.
yes,
Yeah.
it's endemic now, not epidemic. So,
Right.
um, we are out of the pandemic. However, the effects of it have been so far-reaching,
Yes.
so far-reaching.
Yes.
People are still trying to recover from the profound levels of depression and grief that uh, the pandemic brought into their lives, and so
It brought so much.
yes, it
It brought
did. So we're here to help. And oh,
yeah, this
someone said, I was reading,
the
it
last
says,
question.
I'm coming in late, so I apologize if you answered this already, but have you seen real rehabilitation of abusers? Seldom, but I've seen it.
Yes.
I've worked in county programs previously, and I've seen it if the abuser is sincere about being
Mhm.
accountable for their actions
Yes.
and also taking that next step to actually heal.
Yes. I was just going to say, if they're serious and going to, and really take the steps that need to be taken, it can happen, but
Mhm.
it is rare.
It is rare, yes.
They definitely, if an abuser is willing to go into individual therapy for himself and deal with his trauma wherever,
Mhm.
or her trauma,
Mhm.
wherever that started, many times, many
Yes.
times, it's from childhood, and they're
Mhm.
willing to go deal with that and work through that, then anybody can be rehabilitated. I mean, we wouldn't believe in God, right? If
I
but
know.
but but it it doesn't happen as often as we would like for it to happen,
Mhm.
but it can happen.
It can happen. It takes quite a bit of humility for an abuser to make a complete 180.
Hmm.
That it requires a profound amount of humility, which can only come through the Holy Spirit.
Hmm.
Hmm.
There's so much. That's a whole nother program, so I won't
I
go
know.
down that. There's so much more I want to say. And I'm like, oh, we're ending. We're bringing it to a close.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking in the chat. People have been blessed, as you can see.
Oh,
You
I
know,
hope
Sarah.
so.
Yeah,
Yes.
Sarah Jones says wonderful discussion, and she's thanking us for the
Thank you,
information.
Sarah.
So that's what we try to do here on Mental Health Mondays, is talk about things that are mental health issues that are not always talked about, and deal with those things, to be able to share these things and to be able to help you in your life. So that is always our goal. And if you didn't share at the beginning, please share this broadcast with on your social media and with family and friends, because I don't think you're alive and living if you haven't experienced trauma on some level living in this world and in this life. So
That's right.
everyone can benefit from this information, everyone. Um,
Absolutely.
but yeah, I just want to thank all of you for viewing. Thank you, Christina. Again, thank you for
Thank
doing this
you.
last minute. And
Thank you for having me. It's
you,
been fun. I love
yes,
talking about this stuff.
you will be back. So Christina will be back. If she's willing to come back, we'd love to have
I'm
her
willing
back.
and ready.
I'm already planning. Well, we'd like to have you on our church program on Sabbath morning to go over some stuff that I think the viewers will benefit from.
Yes.
And we want you back here too. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you for viewing, and we just hope that you have a very good night. And until the next time, be blessed. Bye bye.